not every game that nobody's made before is automatically good and interesting, obviously. But I do think that people nowadays are looking for more unique experiences.
We don't design games like, okay, it has to be exactly this theme or this topic. We want to make good games we like to make, I guess.
Herdling is a herding adventure game.
You are playing as Via and you will encounter fluffy but weird and also magical animals.
And you guide these strange but lovable creatures through all sorts of environments like vast plains, dense forests, and snowy mountains.
You leave the city and you lead them into nature.
For me, it is a lot about the feelings of alienation and coming home.
Far Alone Sales was my bachelor project at university, and even before it was finished, I asked Goran if he wants to work with me on that project and finish it. Goran is the CEO of the company and also administrator. So Goran is a little bit of a counterpoint for me, and he gives me stability, and also I think for the whole team it's always fun when he's around. So he's doing administrative and financial things, and I'm really happy I don't have to do that. He has a lot of creative energy. He also likes to talk with us and give us feedback about the game. It took some time. It was half a year after the bachelor was finished, and then we got together and also started the master's degree together. So it was a lot going on, and I think we had to create the company at that point to make a submission for, I think, a platform or something. So it was out of necessity, and we came up with the name also pretty quickly. OKOMOTIVE is the name of the vehicle of Far Alone Sales. It's a Latin combination, and then it's also locomotive without an L, and it was okay, yeah, fine, let's go with it. From then on, more people joined, I would say every few months, and I kind of managed the projects, university and the company. Far Alone Sales is something that came out of a lot of personal ideas and things I liked, and from this game, the sequel, The Far Changing Tides, grew. Both games are quite close to me, and you see kind of how the games developed or changed, also with how the team changed and what new ideas came in and what we wanted to make different. So both games are about a vehicle where you go on a journey. Your protagonist alone in this world with this vehicle, and it's about also creating a bond with this vehicle and getting to know the vehicle, how it works and how to manage it in more difficult situations like in storms, and also just enjoying progressing through the landscapes and enjoying the journey. They're both relaxing games with beautiful views and moments, and also emotional moments where you have to overcome challenges together with the vehicle, which also strengthens the bond. And I don't think we have an intentional overarching theme. I think what happens is that I have things I like and other people have things they like. I personally really like emotional journeys and emotional experience, and I try to design things from that perspective, because a lot of things are based on Far Alone Sales and then developed from there. So it's there's still some themes from that game that are visible in Far Changing Tides, of course, and also in Herdling.
It's sort of at an interesting intersection, I think, between this atmospheric adventure type of game that, of course, the team has made with Far before, but also this caretaking sort of cozy animal element, but yeah, not entirely falling into that wholesome, everything is sweet and nice niche, but having a certain sense of danger, and your animals can get hurt, and therefore providing a bit of a different emotional experience as well.
The Herdling is about a girl, a herd, and their journey together through the mountains. And I think it's really these three elements that create the game and cool situations and experiences. The idea of having a herd of animals herding through the mountains was a very catchy idea from the start, and then it was just how can we make this fun? And how can we make a game with a certain hours of playtime out of that idea?
I think it's something really unique when you pitch it to someone well, it's this game about guiding a herd on a journey. It's okay, that's something you haven't seen 1,000 times. And I think there's value in that. There's a lot of established genres where people are also looking for new things, of course, but I do think there is an audience and a market for, I want to do something in a game that I've haven't really done before or that I've never seen anyone tackle in a game.
I found the world of Herdling to be really interesting and really mysterious at the same time.
At the beginning, it all feels, I would say, more familiar.
The player is kind of stuck in a really melancholic and grey city.
A city which does not look very comfortable anymore, and soon you will get out into nicer landscapes. So you're out in the nature, you have forests, you have plateaus, or you will also end up in some snowy areas.
But as the journey progresses through these beautiful landscapes, it gets more strange and mysterious.
You delve deeper and deeper into also like the more magical aspects of the world of the Calicoins.
There are these very intricate and interesting structures and a lot of lore hidden all across the world.
There's a part of a secret or like mystical world that's leaking into basically our world, and through that you get a lot of ruins and stuff that is through the leaking destroyed, and therefore you have these ruined parts which you have to sometimes reestablish and recreate or like fixing stuff.
So you will dive more into this magical world as you progress.
The thing that makes the game most unique is that it's like about the bond, but it's also not a managing game. It's like a game where you have fun together and where you can enjoy the moments together.
We explored a couple of different directions, how we wanted to express this interdependency, but we ended up at wanting to make moving with the herd feeling really special, which is why the animals have abilities that enhances the player's movement through the world, which is a really core part. But they're a little bit lost and they need the help of the players to navigate through the world.
In the very first moments of the game, Via meets the first animals, and from there on this bond really starts forming, and yeah, it grows throughout all the game.
One of the main themes is to find a new home, especially like for Via, and the home is also like a bit the herd itself, and also to find together with the home, find a purpose.
You're not just doing stuff for the animals, it's also that there's a bit of a symbiosis there where the animals help you, and like neither party could complete this journey on their own essentially.
And Via comes in and like really gets them out of sometimes perilous situations.
Or she has to keep an eye out for danger, so to guide the animals around that. And if an animal does get hurt, Via can go scavenge for food and feed the animals the food to heal them. The animals, vice versa, help Via, for example, to reach certain places that Via can't by lifting her up there.
They also have a couple of other abilities, such as pushing large obstacles that would be too heavy for the player to push, which the player then has to guide the animals towards so they can proceed together. And there's a couple of other magical elements as well, where this interdependence comes into play.
So Via needs the herd as well as the herd needs Via.
I think we really work hand in hand most of the time. It's a small team, so you actually can talk to all of the people, and the communication is really needed, but I think it also shows in the design that people work together and we're working on that one thing, so it's not different pieces that do not really fit together.
I think the favorite part of working on Herdling was working with the team together. Like the day-to-day, I like going to work and make decisions on the game together and talk about the game and play the game, and we rely to each other a lot. They're helping me and I try to help them, and it's like, I don't know, it's very comfortable right now.
In a way, we're like a herd working together. I trust everyone that is coding. I don't have to like check the code that everyone commits, like, oh, but you have to do this differently or something. Really, it just works. I don't know. We're really happy that it works that way. Like, we can trust each other. The tasks are getting done. We never have to be like, oh, but you have to finish this first and stuff like that. It's just the team is working really, really nice together.
You always have these interdependencies. Most of us studied game design, and there's a very holistic approach to studying at the school we went to. So each of us has some insight into the different disciplines. There's so much collaboration.
Game design or game creation generally is a very collaborative process, which is also what I think I love about it so much. And I basically work with everybody in the team, since I'm like the center of the implementation, together with Isa, of course. But I worked with every person to implement what they have created. And this is always then a back and forth, right? Because it's always like I get handed something and I implement it, and then it's there in the game and you can play it, and the person that has created it like sees it in engine working for the first time and is most of the time very happy. And I think that makes me happy also.
I think the animals are the best example for the work that comes from everybody. Like on the art side, there was Don making the concept, I did the model, Martina did the rigging and the animation, Harry the fur. And then on the other side, there is the game design team, Fabio and Phil and Denise, who designed the behavior, and then Lorenz and Isa, who implemented on the programming side. And of course that needs a lot of communication between everybody.
Our team hierarchy is very flat, so I work together with a lot of different people. I think most closely with Don. We sort of developed and worked on the vision for the game together very tightly and very intensely. We discuss a lot of things in detail, a lot of figuring out how the story unfolds. I also worked closely together with Denise and Philipp, who are actually responsible for most of the level design in the game. They did an incredible job at like translating these discussions we had into places, which was super cool. And I work together very closely, for example, with Isa and Lorenz, who are programmers who also have to create a lot of features and really beautifully staged cameras and so forth to really make it all come together then as an interactive experience, which was really great.
So as with the other games, we really want to have different areas that feel different and look different, and really give this whole journey a sense of scale. And because we have less like human structures than with the 4 games, it was a bit more difficult to create the story with environments. So we wanted to make 2 worlds where you start with the human world and you have the Calicorn world, which is more fantastical, and then to kind of weave them into each other and like have a transition from one point to the other, and you're kind of going through this transition on this adventure. So there's not really like a hard cut where, okay, I enter this fantastical world. There's a mix in some places where you have like human structures and these Calicorn ruins to show where like these worlds collide a little bit. Sam joined our team, I mean, it's over a year, but it feels like relatively recently, but he's a 3D artist and also started doing animations and environment artist also. Like he supported me at the start in creating the world, and at the end he did most of it like by himself, and I focused on other things, and he brought his own like expertise to it to make this cool detailed model that also fit the world, and he learned like the animations quite quickly. It's really fun also to work with him and to discuss art stuff together. I would say the main difference in the aesthetic of Herdling compared to the 4 games is that it's now like 3D and third person. For us that was like a big thing we like kind of were afraid of and tried to be prepared for, but it worked quite well. It's like it felt immediately more immersive when you walk through a 3D environment compared to if you see it from just one side. The art style of Herdling is kind of painterly, but it wasn't really designed or defined like that, I would say. It's the idea we come from is to how can we create these landscapes and how can we communicate this atmosphere with limited resources kind of. They are now a bit bigger than before, but it's like still we kind of need to find a way how we can make believable landscapes that are not like just like overly realistic. So we had to be quite carefully how we designed them. What was also important was to fit the landscapes and the environment together with the gameplay, and to make the path where you run through and you walk through not like a separate thing, but also like part of the environment. And at the same time you really clearly have to know where you can go and where the borders are. So this was a difficult thing to design, and we wanted to create a bit of an environment that is a bit more colorful than the previous games, and I think to create a bit more of a positive atmosphere and to make each area of the game stand out on its own because of the colors. Also, this time we have Harry.
Harry is our technical artist, and he did all sorts of custom fur technology.
For me, it's kind of a bit like magic what he does. Like, I don't know how it works. I want to know kind of, but I don't have time to learn it. It creates like ice or like stuff breaking or like the fur, and then there's new iteration of fur that looks even better, and then it's like 5 new versions of the fur, and every version looks better than the one before, and it's like just fun to more or less like just watch it and see how good it becomes. It's also very entertaining when I'm not working and just looking what Terry's posting in the chat. It's like, okay, it's like cool updates. The things he designed and he made are a huge part of what the design and look of the game is now.
I was responsible for a lot of the systems that had to do with a lot of the visuals of the game, like the foliage placement and rendering, the fur on the beasts, the clouds, the fog, the water, all of that stuff. I think that all of those systems contributed a lot to the look of the game when put together. Of course, the art team was responsible to put them to good use, but I think that overall these shaders and tools and systems, they just helped both the art team and the code team realize the creative vision as efficiently as possible.
With Herdling, we kind of continued the art style of the previous games of OKOMOTIVE from the FAR series, and it has some form of abstraction in it, but still it has a high material feel in a way. So one characteristic are the textures. We paint all of them by hand in Photoshop. We work with Unity and Blender for most. So we do all of our 3D models in Blender, and also Martina, our animator, she rigs and animates in Blender.
Tim is also an artist, and he does like also environment art, also foliage. He did a lot of like the flowers and the trees, and this became like essentially his area, and I think like it's a nice area to work on. It's like a lot of colors.
That was a lot of fun for me. I really enjoyed researching all the sorts of plants and trees and bushes, and it was a lot of fun to make these assets to bring some density into the levels. Like, for example, one of my favorites was the rhododendron bush that I learned about doing research. There's a variant of the rhododendron that makes these medium-sized trees with really bubbly crowns out of thick leaves and with bright red flowers. I really wanted to have that in the game.
I really like to work with Tim also because I like to discuss artistic decisions with other people and other artists, and he also has a very different approach on how he designs things, and I'm always happy to learn from that and to just like see what comes up with discussions and what we can change about like the environment in the game, but just generally like the process of doing art together.
So in the beginning of the project, we did a lot of concept art, and Don came up with a first version of the look of the Calicorns. And I think that was a really big moment of the project because it gave this foreshadowing of how the world could feel, this mysterious strangeness that we went for.
Surprisingly, it was quite clear from the start, at least for me, like how the Calicorns should look in general. They should feel kind of like these mountain animals, but also a bit more than just an animal. A lot of references were also from like costumes, were like fur costumes from Switzerland and like from Bulgaria, where they dress like kind of furry demons. These were quite interesting to have like this feeling, okay, maybe it's just like a costume and it's not like an animal, and to play with that. And then also to create a bit this mix between making them cute and approachable and like have this fur that is nice to touch, but also making them a little bit mysterious and also dangerous, and have like these horns and maybe these markings, and so they should feel like a bit imposing and like an unknown creature, so you kind of are afraid to approach them, but when you get to know them, you really like them, and they also feel powerful because they're so big. So it's like to play with this contrast of they feel like dangerous at the beginning, and then you get to know them, and then they are like, okay, it's your new family now. To make the Calicorns a bit more special, we've tried to give them some sort of supernatural power that doesn't feel like too much like magic or something. So it's part of their nature and where they come from. And this helped us also to create moments in the game where you get this motivation to run and collect flowers, and also to play with the communication of the story, with like paintings that can be revealed by the powers of the animals. So it's a way for communicating different states of the animals, but also to make them a bit special and give them a connection to their home. I think we knew that we couldn't make a lot of enemies, and also we didn't want to make like a fighting game. Then I tried to design something that's not really on the same plane as animals. It can fly above it, but you don't really have the idea to fight against it like one-to-one. It flies above you, it attacks you, then it flies away. And then I just tried to make a really creepy bird, maybe like mix some spider elements into it. So yeah, it's like we really wanted to do a lot with just one type of enemy, and then it was almost too effective, I guess, in some situations. It was really creepy, and then we found other ways how we could use them in the story and in other parts of the game where they have like kind of different mechanics, but still it's like the idea is not to fight against them, but more like to guide the herd and in this way be protective of the herd. It's more like they should be an unapproachable danger, kind of, where you just have to run if it becomes too dangerous.
One really challenging thing was we wanted players to feel responsible for the animals and to feel rewarded for interacting with them while not making it extrinsically motivated. So we didn't want it to feel like, okay, if you go pet that animal, you get a cookie. It should feel like they really wanted to engage with the animal and that was voluntary. And
we just reference a lot of just what we like to do when meeting an animal. So it was like, okay, yeah, we have to pet him. And it was more about the question like, okay, how many of those ideas can we put into the game? And it's quite sad that we cannot put everything into the game. Every interaction takes a lot of work, but we're happy that we have like some of them in the game that are quite cute.
I had the pleasure to do some concepts on how they behave, like do they interact with each other, how do they interact with the player or with the environment.
Denise is the game designer. We have a lot of game designers, but that's game design, I guess. But she also brings like many cool ideas into the games, especially like together with the Calicorns, like what kind of personality they have, what kind of interactions, and some ideas to make them more believable and also make them a bit more alive.
And it's more flavor in most of the way, so it's not necessary, but it helps making them feel alive, and you start liking them more if they do like these small things that you didn't expect them to do, so like to make them feel less like an AI and more like an alive being.
Seeing that coming together as we progressed, that was amazing. Like in the beginning we had these robots like turning on command, and later on they really started to feel like creatures.
We have special or different traits. So there's a brave animal, there's an affectionate animal, and you will have animals that help you. So there's logs to collect at the fireplaces, and there's those animals that go there and wait for you to pick them up, for example. So these are like small interactions that are specific to different animals. It's just fun to play fetch, and it's a kind of like a bond between the player and the animals, and you cannot communicate, but you can still play this game, and it just, I think it's a nice feeling to bond with these animals, and it feels special.
I think the most challenging part was to get the herd right and to have like the guiding mechanic working, but at the same time to make the herd feel believable and alive without being annoying.
I think the animals are, obviously it's the core of the game, and it's really this point where the work of everybody intersects.
Isa had looked at herd behaviors and how creatures move, and we had different systems of how they would follow each other.
There was a very cute bug that I didn't even fix because it was so cute. It was when you were taming an animal. After you tamed it, there was another animal, like a small one, just like circling the other animal and looking at it and just walking around a couple times. And when you would repel the herd again, it would stop, so it wasn't a block or anything. It just looked really cute, and we had no idea why they're doing this. I actually haven't seen it in a while, but still, we never fixed it, and if it would appear when you're playing the game, it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Really bringing these creatures to life was a challenge that I think we achieved. So I'm quite happy with where we got with the herd. I made a 3D model for the calicorns, and after that Martina, she rigged and animated the animals.
If you see the animations, you also think about Martina. Martina is also part of the company since very early on, and we also studied together. So she's a very close friend, I would say, and I really like working with her. She did a lot of, or most of the animations in the game, especially for the calicorns. And she brings so much like love into the animals. She has so much fun making it, and you really feel like the love and the fun in these animations.
You didn't ask whether you can pet the calicorns, but I'm gonna answer this for you. You can, and you can pet them anytime you want.
One thing I like about the guiding mechanic is that it manages to strike a very delicate balance between giving you control over the herd, but also giving you the sense that these are animals with a mind of their own.
I don't know any game that has the mechanic of guiding a herd. There are a couple of games, but none of them works really the same way. And this is also quite challenging for us because when we were in the design process, we wouldn't know whether it would work out. Like, would it be fun to guide that herd? Or would it just be boring? And yeah, I think the mechanics makes it really special, and of course the atmosphere.
If you have too much control, they're going to feel kind of like robotic and not alive. Whereas if you don't have enough control, it's going to be really frustrating to actually get them to where they need to be, especially in the like narrower or more dangerous passages. And I think that turned out really well, that this balance is achieved.
I loved working on the movement mechanics in the game, and like the stampede mechanic, and trying to really make it fun to move through the world with the creatures. I think that has been most enjoyable for me.
Fabio has a lot of roles, but like he's lead game designer, he does sound, and he is a communication partner for the music, and also a lot of this overall creative discussions with me, and he's a big part of the creative process.
I would say the game has certain different layers to how we approach level design. Like in the beginning of the game, we kind of tried to sit down and create like a map of the overall scope of the game. And then when we would sort of tackle a certain part of the game very specifically, we would sit together with like different people of the game design and level design team, as well as Don and or Tim from the art department. And we would really talk about, okay, like what is the story we want to tell in this part of the game? What is the emotional response that we're trying to evoke for players there? And we would talk about how to best achieve this. Sometimes that meant that maybe a part of a level should be really challenging and fun to move through. Sometimes it was meant to sort of create a sense of freedom and put the joy of movement first. But sometimes it was also about creating more of a serene atmosphere that we really want the player to immerse in, or a part of a level that's really meant to give space to the music. So we would always first talk through what sort of the mission of this part of the level was before working on it.
It's a lot about emotion and creating that emotion through level design.
Philipp does game design and is working really independently, but he has like a really good feel of like what is good game design and what works well also from a game mechanics perspective.
In some cases where we had a lot of iterations, it could happen that like I would do the concept and do an early version, and then someone else would progress later on. But usually one person is designing the level and discussing it with the others and getting input. But it's just kind of how development flows, who has time and who is interested in doing a certain section.
The process usually starts with a block out from someone from the game design team and someone else from the art team. And they will both go explore like previous discussions of what the goal of the area was. And then we will try to combine certain aspects that worked particularly well in those early prototypes. And after that, it's just a matter of iterating and playtesting and then fine-tuning how far apart certain elements have to be.
We usually start with an emotion we want to happen in said area of the game. So if you want something like that makes you feel tense, you start off with like, oh, okay, maybe we want a room that is quite narrow with a lot of corners where you're not certain what's going to be behind the next corner and stuff like that.
Like, what's the feeling? Like, what do players feel when they play through that part? I try to gather as lot of information as I need. So when I have these feelings, or if there's like any other things I need to take into this design, then I just do blockouts and a bit of gut feeling and playing and iterating and asking other people how they feel about it, and then it kind of gradually shapes into what it should be in the end, hopefully.
We work with Unity, but also for level design, I use Photoshop to draw up the levels and basically a top-down map of the level.
I start with concepts that I draw on my iPad, and then I will discuss them, and after this I will go into the engine, so Unity, and there I do blockouts, which I do with ProBuilder. It's a plugin that's provided by Unity, and it's a very basic modeling tool.
And if it works, it goes over to art and they make the beautiful assets in.
We really designed each section individually. So we had a lot of focus on which plants show, what kind of characteristics these areas have. So the foliage develops from lush to being more scruffy and dried out, to no foliage basically in the snowy areas.
I love to work on the forest. I think it was really nice to have these different sections of the forest that change as you progress through it and have these little events that happen within the forest. So I really love that.
But there's also the whole topic of level guidance. So that was, I think, a big challenge of the game, to really make nice flowing levels that have clear guidance on a visual layer. And it was an area that the level designers and our team really worked closely together, like with a lot of back and forth. We used, for example, a lot of lighting to guide the players, or differences in textures, or in the environment design.
And we use a lot of tricks of like particles floating from one point to another to like naturally guide the gaze of the player.
And we have a guidance color, and people have to just look for that color.
We use this saturated teal that we also have used in the previous games of ours. It works really well to catch the eyes of the players and to give focus on interactable elements.
There's a distinction between the environmental color and the signposting color, but it's not too much, so the signposting color still feels part of the world.
The art team has really done a great job of like creating that balance of it's still a believable place, but it's still also readable for players to make informed decisions in.
It's surprising that nothing surprising happens. Maybe it will.
Isa is the technical director of Herdling and also of our company now, and she's overseeing like also the technical stuff and does a lot of programming. She's working like quite quietly, but managing a lot of things. And sometimes I think, okay, I need to be concerned about is the game stable? And then it's like, oh no, it's working. And it's like I don't have to think about it. I'm very happy about that.
Sometimes I'm like, oh, it's working so well. I don't know. But there was nothing surprising during the development I can think of. Mainly, I'm coding and also like leading the entire process of coding. There are other people as well in the team that do coding, so I guide them a little bit. I do code reviews from time to time with them, or if they have questions, also like the entire technical process. Also, if they have problems with version control or anything, I help out. And yeah, I do the code architecture of the game as well. But yes, like most of my work is writing code and also porting, like making the game work on the different platforms. What I don't do is shader stuff. Our technical artist, Harry, is doing that. I still talk with him about these things, but yeah, he knows a lot more than I do there.
On a daily basis, I am mostly tweaking shaders and code for some of the tools that I had made before. A lot of the time I will be fixing what I broke the day before. Then I will mostly coordinate with the code and art team, mostly Isa and Don, about things that need to be fixed and just having everything work properly while still looking good.
Sometimes people ask me whether something is feasible, and I have to tell them, no, we have to implement it in a different way. That's also part of my work, but it doesn't happen. It does happen rarely, actually.
Some of the most challenging parts were regarding the foliage and fur rendering, those systems, because they can be met everywhere in the game. They had to be tweaked to look good, be easy to use, and also run well, especially on lower end consoles. Basically, optimization for these and for other systems was also like very challenging, because things had to still look good while we still had like a good frame rate to play the game on.
The game is built with Unity, that's the engine, and we are using some tools around it, but like we're actually doing most of it on our own. We're also not using AI, of course. It's something you have to tell in this year. And yes, for sound we're using Fmod. Some tools were also from the FAR games, of course. There's always recycled code when you're working in a studio. But because the game's rather different when it comes to the technical structure, because now it is a 3D game, and FAR was like always on the side, and it's our first game that has this structure. So and it's also the first game where I'm the tech lead of. So the beginning of the game, I changed a lot when it comes to the architecture of the game. But yeah, it's mostly just Unity.
We use Unity for our game, and we use Visual Studio as like our editor, but we do write a lot of tools ourselves for the level designers that we of course also use for placing objects and for making our life quicker and easier.
Lorenz or Lenz is a programmer, and I would say like he does a lot more. He has to do the camera stuff and has to help us staging special moments in the game, which is also a very difficult task. And he's very skilled in what he does. He's very fast, and he brings his own opinions, especially now when we're like trying to polish things. He only stops when it's done well, and we can just like doing iterations, like hundreds of iterations kind of, and it's like, okay, still motivated to work, and that's so fun to just have this like kind of steady force that's always like doing good work. It is really nice.
A lot of iterations everywhere. It's never like a really linear process. Most of the time people come with an idea and are like, hey, I got this great idea. I want to do this, I want to do that. And then first you have to like figure out exactly how you translate this into logic, into code. And then you try something and I tell them, hey, this is what the limitations are, what I can do. And then it's this back and forth. And usually at the end, I have to rewrite a lot of stuff and clean it up. Because of course the first draft was mostly just a quick implementation to see how it goes. On a technical level, the camera was super tricky to do because it is so, the camera needs to be able to do everything and is super smooth and super nice all the time and no jitters and frame everything perfectly without, taking away control. It's just this everything that comes together and all these different things that it should do, and finding the right compromises to it was difficult on a design level, but also implementing this actually in engine, making tools for the level designers to use, making all those different behaviors that you can easily iterate on was for sure the hardest part for me. And since we have such an immersive game, it was very important to everybody that the camera was super smooth and it had no cuts and it was all very atmospheric. And there was always like these two opposing sides. It was always me in the middle, then there was Fabio on one side saying, hey, gameplay is important, you know. You as the camera, you need to see where the herd goes. You need to make informed decisions. And on the other hand, we had Don, who was like, hey, the camera needs to be super immersive and very close to VR, and you need to see the sky, and it's going to be so amazing. But then you didn't see where you were going. And we had to find this middle ground of making gameplay work and making atmosphere and immersion work at the same time. And this is also why it took me like, I think, 8 months to really do all the camera work, because every moment is specially crafted, every moment needs to be specially designed, also with the camera in mind, to make it work on both an emotional and on a gameplay level. For example, right now I'm working on the first bird encounter zone, and we want to have the player understand the relation between the carrions that are placed there and the birds reacting to it. And always like people come and are like, I have this idea of making a strong zoom and focusing the player's gaze on this bird, and then you will completely realize that, you know, these two things are connected. And then this is a technical challenge, and the way it is set up, it doesn't quite work, so I had to make some adjustments, make some workarounds, and in the end we realized, hey, it wasn't working. You just felt like you lost control and it wasn't having the desired effect. So we sat back together and we're like, hey, okay, it's not working. Let's try some more lights. Let's try to make an event where when the carrion gets thrown over the first time, the herd will actually stop and look at the bird, so the player don't have to manage both the herd and the realization of the moment at the same time and stuff like this. I had to do a lot of staging like beforehand, so I will try to rotate the camera already to look in the correct direction and actually prevent that the player can look backwards, so that everything is in view, and then some more little camera shakes and sprinkles everywhere and more VFX. And I think in the end this moment will be super cool. And I think we solved a lot of issues by just redesigning the level, so that you very naturally will be drawn to look at what's actually relevant. And I think we've done a pretty good job. I think I would do a lot of things differently if I had the chance of redesigning some parts of it, but you always learn, right?
Most of the bugs that came up were just testing my sanity, or like they just straight up disappeared when I tried to investigate them more. So not so fun, just me losing my mind.
I'm kind of a fan of bugs because it's like refreshing to be like, oh, that never worked like this, and I kind of have too much fun with these.
The one that comes to mind was in earlier versions when we didn't tag a ground, right? And the animals would move onto it, then they would start like vibrating and like going like almost like cartoon cars. Yeah.
There was one that also was really funny, like when Via is pushing an obstacle out of the way, we are using inverse kinematics for the arms, so they are at the right position. And she would stop pushing, but the arms wouldn't stop. So she would like walk around like a zombie with her arms like this or like this. And yeah, it was like looking really funny. But yeah, we fixed that one, so you won't see it anymore, I hope.
Making something that is engaging but also feel this calm we wanted to have in the game. That's kind of always a difficult thing to have something calm but also making it engaging enough.
Early on, it's probably better to be more forgiving, especially because our core game mechanic is quite unique, I think. We had to make sure that players have enough space to explore those mechanics without a sense of really strong negative consequence. But as the game progresses, we also wanted players to feel like their actions matter and there is consequence to failure. But we always try to make sure that players would have a fair chance to respond to things.
So we're generally more on the, I guess, generous side of game design on this project, and I think the main point is just to make it easier than you think it needs to be, because we're playing it all day long, we're pretty good at it. So yeah, make it easy and also let it be tested by other people and see if they struggle or not.
Playtesting is very important, so we see how our features work out in the game and whether people really understand what they're supposed to do. Like, for example, we do have the beginning of the game, which has some tutorials on how to control the herd. And yeah, we had to rework that many times.
The whole guiding the herd system is like incredibly complex. That was a huge challenge to accomplish. You do playtesting to check if it works from a guidance perspective, if people find out where they need to go and the whole signposting and stuff like that, if that works. You never know until you see a player who's never played the game play it.
I did some of the playtests, not all of them of course, but it's sometimes hard to just sit there and see them struggle. But it's kind of, for me, it's a bit also enjoyment just to be like, well, what did I miss? And based from that, we changed, I guess, the tutorials a lot of times.
I don't know, I would say around 5 times or something, that tutorial.
Yeah, we just recently did, I hope, a last iteration of working on the introduction of the game. And I think now I'm really happy with how it's set up. I think what really helped was isolating the different aspects of the gameplay to make sure people had a fair chance to grasp it. For example, like introducing the movements of the character before players encounter an animal for the first time. And then once you encounter an animal for the first time, in the beginning it will only be one animal, so it's very clear like what sort of the action and reaction cycle of that part of the gameplay is for players. And then we try to introduce new obstacles and challenges step by step in an isolated fashion before we combine them together to create challenging gameplay sequences. We also use tutorials a bit more heavily than in our previous games, just because the gameplay mechanic is more unique, I think, than in our previous games. And there's less sort of context for players to know from other games and to sort of draw information from on how to approach the game in the first place.
Herdling has a mechanic that is not something that you see a lot. Like, I wouldn't know any game that has the mechanic of herdling. So we have to make sure that it works. And that's why we have so many playtests with different kinds of people.
But it definitely has been like one of the most challenging parts to get right, because if the introduction isn't working, it kind of doesn't matter how beautiful the story and the atmosphere and everything behind that introduction will be, right? Because players might not be able to really interact with it in a joyful way.
Composing for a game is fundamentally different from making a score for a movie, because in the movie you make one finished experience, and in the game you try to find thousands of different versions, and the goal is to give each player the feeling that it was meant exactly in that way.
Joel is our composer also for like the previous games.
This is already the 3rd time I work with OKOMOTIVE. I have been making music for Far Lone Sails and Far Changing Tides.
I'm really happy that we could like keep him, because like he's really busy and he's very artistic and kind of chaotic in how he works.
And my head is going like in 1,000 directions.
But he doesn't make compromises on his artistic vision until it's perfect. And I'm really happy that he does that, because like I feel sometimes pressure to finish something instead of making it absolutely perfect. And I think like it's good to have this part, and it's just like a cool person also.
For Lone Sails and Changing Tides, the main goal from the music side was to give the player an emotional connection to the vehicle they were driving. For Herdling, I'd say there's a big scope between intimate, being alone in the nature, and also, on the other hand, running through a field with your huge herd. So it could feel and be the music quite small, and at the other part really huge. So there's a big scope inside of the score. For me, dynamic music is mostly just fun. It's a different aspect, it's a different way of working, but for me, rather than being an obstacle to get out of the way, it's a source of inspiration. To think about what could happen there, how the player could influence with their behavior inside of the game, the music that is playing at a certain point.
I worked quite closely with Joel to implement the music.
Fabio is my first person to talk about the interactive
music inside of the game, and we would also try out those parts together, and then I'll try to find a new solution inside FMOD.
After we've designed the zone visually and conceptually, but also as a playable prototype, we would sit together with Joel. We would tell him kind of what we wanted the emotional journey of the player to be, and we would sit together and kind of discuss how the music needs to be structurally built to achieve this goal. For Herdling, this often meant that the music had to respond to how fast players are moving through the terrain, because they have a lot of control over how they want to pace it, and it was really important to really create strong emotional impact, that the music's pacing was kind of matching the player's movement.
So FMOD Studio is a graphical surface where I can see in which direction that the music goes, sort of a bit like in a tree way, where you can see when the player behaves in this way, it will go in this direction and vice versa. And already with this tree scheme, you can feel and see that there are literally thousands of different possibilities on how the music in the end will be playing inside of the game.
We designed things together with him, especially like certain moments, like when we kind of get to a point, okay, it doesn't really work like that to get this emotion across, like an important moment in the game, and then like, okay, he has a different approach, and maybe the music solves something we couldn't solve just with like gameplay and visuals. And sometimes it's the other way around. So it's like the music really helps us create the game, and it also helps us to enjoy moments in the game where we have previously played, and then we have new music, and it's kind of a big motivation also for us to play the game and to see when the emotion really kicks in.
When there were discussions about sound aspects, like technical wise, it would always be in a chat with Fabio. When there were story-based questions, I would discuss them with Don and Fabio to get their view and just to get their vision, and I tried to come up with something that comes close to what they were feeling and thinking about. Don and Fabio are different people with a different view on things, and if I could manage to please them both with an idea, I knew that I'm onto something. The most challenging part about the score for Herdling was that I wanted to move forward and wanted to show a different world than in the Far series, but still I wanted to stay true to my musical ideas and the way that I work. For the score of Herdling, I used an instrument called fuchara, which is a Slovakian flute, or Chinese hulusis, or the tri-welding object that I built, or Finnish national instrument called kantele, but there are lots of different other instruments also involved.
And also an orchestra. Spoiler.
And it's a mixture of different cultures and different musical backgrounds that gives something new. I mean, I'm not even trying to play those instruments in the traditional way because I won't be able to fulfill those needs. I will just try to find a new way, my personal way, onto these instruments and make some sounds out of them and combine them in a unique way that should probably help to form a new, unique world. And I even got to create and build 2 instruments on my own. One was called a nail violin. It's quite a simple instrument where you would bow nails, and that gives kind of an uneasing emotion and quality to it. And the other one is a triangular metallic structure that I could beat up and make a lot of noises with it. The best part about my job is when guest musicians come in, because with their creativity and their ability on their instruments, they bring a project forward and give me new motivation, and it makes just fun to record with real humans. I had, for example, Federico Loy playing the bassoon for one session. And his ability on this instrument took this project to another level, quite honestly.
It's quite cool when everything comes together, and then you get to this point of emotion where like really like everything plays together really well, and even if you play it the 10th or the 20th time, it still works.
There's like an informational layer to sound design of just like confirming to the player that they're in fact moving in the right direction and sort of interacting with the world as intended by the game. One way we use sound to hint players towards new calicorns is, for example, the sound of the animal itself, or the animal just moving through terrain that can give away its location and pinpoint players towards the right places. In some cases, we use sound design to warn players of dangers or navigational obstacles they have to move around. And sometimes we also use it to foreshadow events which like have relevance to the story of the game. But there's also a game feel side to it that is more about like making interactions feel impactful and fun and engaging. But also it was really important for me to immerse the player in the world. I think that was really like at the core of most of my design decisions in the sound design. It was less about realism and more about like creating the sense of like a certain place. So there's a lot of sounds of like foliage moving as the herd and the players move through the world. I also try to explore some like ASMR elements to that to make the players really feel like they're part of the world as they move through it. If, for example, an object is pushed, feels as heavy as it looks and as it moves. And I can almost feel it as I do that, despite the missing haptic feedback. A lot of the spaces are like a hyper-stylized version of the environments and contain some of like maybe the more cliche or common sounds you would expect in those areas, like maybe some leaves or branches rustling in the forest, maybe some insects you hear buzzing around as you traverse through the world. Wind was also a very important aspect. I think especially in the mountains, the windiness and maybe also the coldness of certain places was a really core aspect of like the ambient sound design, I think. On the other hand, sound was really important to make the calicorns expressive and communicate to the player kind of what they need or what they want at the moment. And we use sound as well a lot to guide players to certain objects that maybe are the primary focal point at certain points in time. Calicorns voices are made up of a lot of different sounds. Some animal sounds, of course. You will find a lot of camel voice in there because it's a sound that I think for a lot of people is very foreign, so it's not clearly identifiable, which was really neat for me as a sound designer. There's also some, for example, sounds of a screwdriver scraping on rough paper and a lot of like non-animal sounds that are part of the sound design as well. A lot of birds and cat sounds that have been like heavily processed and rearranged in different ways to kind of create something that feels very familiar and has like a lot of these like bonding aspects that we know from maybe the pets we love, but still feels like it's something else and not, oh yeah, this is clearly a cat that they use for this, I think. The sound design of the predators was something that was like quite early on in the process of working on the sound, something that I felt like, okay, I've created something that isn't just like a reprocessed bird sound, but really fits the design of the predators as well. That was really fun. And I think just in general, the sound design of using the stampede feature with the herd is something that is also really satisfying to use.
I don't know, I don't have a formula how to grow a successful indie team.
Well, we recently decided that chocolate for free for everyone.
We always have a break at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we started doing push-ups during those breaks. I don't know quite why we did that, but I think it's a nice ritual of us just coming together, doing a bit of activity, since we are very much bound to our screens in our day-to-day life. So yeah, We do some push-ups, we do some stretchings, just to, you know, pretend like we are also a bit healthy, I guess. But to countermeasure that, we of course eat chocolate afterwards.
We're really enjoying this, and it's just nice to not just have to talk about work. Sometimes we end up doing more discussions about different aspects, but it's just a more free setting where everyone is allowed to chime in and just put their notes and wishes in, and it really creates this nice atmosphere. I feel very kind of at home here, which I think is great to have at the workplace, and those breaks help do that.
I don't know if it sounds maybe a bit cliche, but it's like we are really in a luxurious position where we have the time, the money to work on this game. It's like we slowly professionalized ourselves in a way to give us stability. But it was like, I think the whole process until now feels like just growing all the time without overexpanding. And it's like it feels like comfortable growth from our experience with the FAR games, and to see like, okay, this game was so big and it cost so much and we had so many people with it. Okay, that's how can we go from there? And like, so we have an impression of how a big project works in this. Like, we try to be careful in not like overscaling and trying something we have no idea about. And in some cases, also in our previous games, we kind of had to adjust the budget to be smaller or bigger in some cases. And we fit the project, but with Herdling, this was not the case. It was like we were able to create what we wanted to create. And it became, of course, bigger during development, but in a range where it was manageable.
Herdling is very similar in a way to the FAR games. It is a linear game, and like the time you need to complete the game is also similar. So we already knew a bit like how much time it will take and what we're doing, because it's not the first time we do a game that is this size. And I think this is also why the schedule is working out.
So with our previous games, we had good experiences with publishers, and there's also a way for us to not think about money all the time once we have it, and then also to get support from the publisher. And it's like, we can focus on development and somebody else is doing the rest of the work, kind of. But because we only work with publishers, we don't have internal experience yet to like go into a different direction. And it's like something we have to try at some point, and it's like to see what other options are there. But I think in the past and also for Herdling, it works very well. It's really great to work with Panic, to be honest. It's also really fun. It's a bit, I would say, sometimes a bit chaotic, but that makes it also a bit adventurous. It's like you really feel the motivation of the people at Panic, and see both teams with like these amazing people working together.
The most surprising thing was how on time we were with development. I think that has been kind of crazy, especially comparing to like our previous experiences in development. We were kind of surprised ourselves, and it was just like the team worked in a very different constellation than before, and for me it has been really awesome to see just how well we settled in this like new team setup and configuration. That was really cool.
There were a lot of technical and design issues, but I really feel that the team was really firing on all cylinders. I never once got tired of working on this project, and I feel that this was the overall sentiment. Everything went quite smooth with the development, and all the organization and the tasks and the milestones and everything just fell into place really well. But I really feel that the overall process was really fun, and that the final result really makes justice of that.
And I think since we're so good in schedule, we're still all very happy, and we're still super chill, and we still make a lot of jokes, and we have the time that we need to actually finish this to a degree that is satisfying for us.
Surprisingly, everything went very close to what we planned. I was a bit afraid that, okay, at some point there will be stress, there will be crunch, that we get to a point where everybody's annoyed and there's no fun anymore, and it's just like work. But this didn't really happen, I guess, and we're now at the end of development, and it's like, okay, it's like we quite relaxed and we're looking forward to finishing the game, and we put like little things in we want to improve, but we don't have to make like sacrifices for the game. We can just like make the game we want, and we see then like how the release goes, and we're looking forward to that.
My favorite part is seeing everything come together. Like in the beginning, you implement some features and it's nice, but then suddenly people are working on it and you try out the sequence of the game, and suddenly you see, oh, now there's flowers there, and oh, nice mountain in the background, and the music just came in, and just having that and seeing everything come together is so cool.
Seeing it all come together and like also experience the feeling that we wanted the player to feel that yourself is quite fascinating always, because you as the creator know what's going to happen, you know how it is behind the curtains, but if you still get the feeling, then we have done something correctly, and I think that's nice.
When people play the game, the experience that I want them to have is a very fun but also very relaxing one. There are a lot of games out there that will test your reflexes or your brain power, but Herdling is special in a way because it creates this emotional bond between you and the animals. You end up really caring for the herd, and it is just very fun to guide it around, even if you don't know what you will find at the top of those mountains. Just this whole journey is a very meditative experience, and I really hope that players get to feel that way.
I hope that people like grow fond of their calicorns along the journey.
I hope they feel like they are on an adventure, and that during the adventure they create this bond with the animals and they get to like them. Maybe they are a bit like annoyed by some of them because they kind of have a little bit of their own mind in some cases, but that you feel like, okay, you get to the end of the game and you look back on what little moments you had with the herd and what cool things you experienced, and it feels like a whole adventure.
I hope it's going to be a really relaxing experience for people playing it, like very similar to the 4 games as well. That you can just for a moment sit back, relax, enjoy the music, enjoy the atmosphere. But there are also parts in the game that are tense and a little bit scary. And I like the idea that people are liking this, oh, something's happening, it's tense, and then again they can relax and get out of this tense situation.
I hope for them to enjoy going on this hike with those calicorns, and if they finish playing the game, that they can say, hey, I spent a good time and had fun playing this.
I hope that the game will suck them in the best possible way, where they have one whole experience and afterwards they would look back and smile.
It's a great way to get your mind off things, like really dive into this world and really feel being outside and being free.
I hope players will have a wonderful adventure with the game and that they have a lovely time bonding with the herd and each individual calicorn.
I for sure hope that people will be able to connect with the story and the feelings that we're trying to create. Like I've touched upon what I think the game makes me feel, and to have some sort of reaction generally would be nice. That people play it, and I mean, we have super cute animals, so I of course hope that people will like to interact with those animals and will feel connected to them.
I hope that people can approach the game with kind of a sense of wonder and a sense of wanting to engage with those creatures. And I think they will experience something extraordinary where they really get to, on one hand, really immerse in this magical world that we've created, but on the other hand also really create a bond to those creatures that I hope will linger within them long after they stopped playing.
There was that one day where kind of nobody was working and I was out of my task, so I decided now it's time for docs. So I just modeled and animated a doc and put it in, and it was just fun for me to see how nobody thought I would really do it, and once they discovered the doc they were like, oh, you really did that?